How's it going today, folks? Welcome to the stream. So as promised, today we're going to be checking out the new album. I feel like I need some background music again. Hold on, pull up that droning ambient we were just listening to. I need some background music before my music starts. How's that? Is that good? I was kind of vibing out to this. Alright, let me drink some water here. I went to the gym today. I worked legs. I did a little bit of cardio, but I couldn't stop coughing today, so I didn't do my normal amount of cardio. I did a bit less, unfortunately. So today, SYNTHPLANE XPAC ROM.2, if I can speak correctly here. SYNTHPLANE XPAC ROM.2 releases. It's available for $1. Released April 2nd, 2025. XPAC ROM.2 brings you 45 minutes of dungeon and fantasy synth, chiptunes, and more. Visit a bustling oceanside city, the playful current of a river, the elves of Forest Home, a village sitting on stilts upon a lake, and a mine shaft where the magnetic polarity switches repeatedly, dragging and slamming rocks around an irregular beat. Whether you're finding the key to release the damned held in the ashy prison forest Trent, fighting through Numerat and the Mitosaurian menace, avoiding the poisonous mushrooms in the sporest, or toppling the tower to the false gods, you will be enjoying your adventure into the SYNTHPLANE. Electronic, ambient, chiptune, dungeon synth, fantasy synth, industrial, Nintendo, progressive, Sega Genesis, Worcester. Those are my tags. Alright, well, what do you say we just start into it? Alright, we're gonna lose the ambience now. We're gonna lose the droning. Alright. So there are 2 tracks that have visualizers. That's Leaf Shade and Struggle, the Fucked to Death mix. Leaf Shade's the first song on the album, so we're going to start off with a visualizer. This is kind of like the anthem of the album. It's kind of like quintessential fantasy synth. Kind of dungeony synth. All of this is a bit more fantasy synth than it is dungeon synth. That's okay. Alright, enjoy. All right, that was the first track. You may have noticed halfway through I went to turn this quality up over here because it looked to me a little low quality, but it told me it was already on 1080. I mean, it was auto, but it was 1080. So I guess that's just the way YouTube processes videos. I guess that's, I mean, there are like, a lot of numbers and colors and stuff flowing by, so it probably got compressed a bit. Well, you can see my recommendations. You can tell I've been listening to the Devil May Cry 3 OST. What else can you see? Okay, everyone's recommendations are filled with Nintendo Switch 2 shit today, so that's not special. Yeah, I do listen to Ministry. Where You At Now, Crash and Burn, Twitch version 2 by Ministry, one of the best songs, one of the best industrial mixes of all time. 12 minutes of pure industrial straight to the cranium. All right, let's move on to the next track, City Center. City Center is more of a light-hearted track. It's very how do I want to describe it? It's very light, as I already said. It's a bustling port city right on the east coast of the SYNTHPLANE, the world that this music is composed about. The port is called Velican Harbor, and it's a bustling center of activity. And this is meant to be a theme of the downtown area. That's a fantastic track. Two of my favorite parts of it are the way the chords on the piano change at the end, as well as the panning on the, harpsichord, clavichord, that stringy instrument that I used over the pianos. Like I said, I don't know, last stream, some of this music I've been working on for over a year, so I don't quite remember everything I did. But I particularly like the panning right panning on the high notes from that string instrument and left panning on the low notes. And since the melody is kind of a up and down and up and down, you keep kind of waving back and forth between right and left. And it's something I wasn't even entirely aware of until later on while I was making that song, when I noticed, hey, I did this with the strings. That's kind of cool. That's kind of awesome. All right, the next song is Prison Forest Getrennt. Prison Forest Getrennt is a dark forest down in the Sundered Lands. The Sundered Lands are a chunk of land that was split off from the main SYNTHPLANE landmass. It was split off by one of the deities of the SYNTHPLANE world. And in that time, it has become a dark and accursed land of vampires and beasts. And in this land, there is a dark and ashy forest within which the Javires keep some of their prisoners. They, of course, keep other prisoners within the towers and walls of their own Javire castle. But some of their prisoners they keep in the forest. It was intended to be explorable in a first-person dungeon crawler RPG that I've been working on and off for about a year and a half now. Who knows if it'll ever get made, but if it does, it sure will have this song in it. Enjoy! very somber, very slow. The next track, Along the Eastern River, as you might have guessed, is a track that's supposed to be set to a journey along one of the rivers in the eastern side of the world, the eastern side of the SYNTHPLANE. The song is it attempts to mimic the playful rushing of a river down its course, if that makes sense. It's a minimalist piece, particularly inspired by the works of like Steve Reich and Philip Glass. I think you'll find a lot of the piano pieces are minimalist on some level in their core or in every part of their being, and oftentimes they are also inspired by Philip Glass or Steve Reich. What can you do? What can you do? This next track is one of my favorites. It's called Herodgore Pastures, and it's just like a real fun, upbeat, happy Game Boy chiptune. It won't run on an actual Game Boy. I almost said GBA cartridge. It won't run on an actual Game Boy cartridge. Unfortunately, it required 2 Game Boy sound chips to create. Like the one Game Boy sound chip just wasn't quite enough. I wanted to squeeze one more melody into the song, so I added another Game Boy sound chip. Oh well. It's a great song though, one of my favorites. Check it out. That was Herod Gore Pastures, one of my favorite songs on the album. This next track is called Cold Love. It's a sad song about love. Honestly, that's not my favorite song on the album. I used to dig it, but the more I listen to it, I'm just, I'm not feeling it anymore. I'm just not fucking with it anymore. I made it about a year ago, so that's how it goes. Maybe even more than a year ago at this point. I feel like I made that around January 1 year ago. Not even like this recent January, but the January a year ago. That's like 14 months. The Elves of Forest Home 2. That's right, this is a sequel track. The Elves of Forest Home 1 was a track on XPAC ROM.1. The Elves of Forest Home. 1 minute 25 seconds. How far we've come. A sequel track, very exciting. Let's check it out. maybe later after we finish listening to this album, we'll go back and listen to the Elves of Forest Home 1. That's one of my favorite little songs on this album, The Elves of Forest Home 2. It's pretty simple, but I like its melodies, and I like its sounds. The next one, Lake Top Village. This is actually kind of connected to along the Eastern River, because the Lake Top Village actually sits atop the lake that this river comes out of. Right to the north of the river is this big lake with this village on stilts. Also near the river is a ranger camp. And actually alongside the river, but not quite next to the lake, is Forest Home. So we're kind of exploring that general region of the map right now with this music. Lake Top Village is a Sega Genesis chiptune. It's a bit strange, but it's good. It feels like it wants to throw you off rhythm, but then it contrasts that with the familiar and comforting melodies of something that feels like Phantasy Star or maybe even Star Tropics. Anyways, check it out. All right. Fun little track. Not too long. Doesn't overstay its welcome. The next track is Numerat, which maybe should have featured on the Dark Forest EP, but it wasn't done. And if it had come out on the Dark Forest EP, it wouldn't be as good because I changed it around. It's different now. It's an NES-style chiptune that utilizes Konami's VRC6 sound chip that they used in some of the Japanese releases of their games towards the end of the NES's lifespan. Like Castlevania 3. Great example of it. Here's Numerat. Enjoy. You could imagine that playing as you're fighting through the busy tunnels and stairwells of Numerat, the ziggurat featured here, actually, on the album art. That is Numerat on the lake. This lake is actually the lake we were speaking about earlier. Well, actually, no, it's not. There are two lakes. This lake is connected to the lake we were speaking about earlier. There's a river which runs from this lake that we're looking at in the west over to the Village on Stilts Lake in the east. And then the Eastern River comes out of that second lake. It all gets fed from this big lake, and more specifically, the waterfall and whatever source of water is up there, which I have not delved into even a little bit. Well, I mean, not in music, not in writing, not in fiction. Oh, but I've been thinking about it. I've got a pretty solid idea of everything that's going on up there. And if you lived in this building at the top, you'd probably have a decent view too. The next track is Exploring the Sporest. I'm going to be honest, folks, this one is not my favorite track on this album. I was excited to get it released and get it out there, but now that I've been listening to it for a couple days, it's not my favorite. I think it has to be 3 minutes 34 seconds, but I sure wish it was like 1:30. It needs to be 3 minutes 34 seconds so that you can go through multiple waves, basically. It kind of builds waves of tension and then releases them slowly. It's called Exploring the Sporest because it's the music that would play while you are exploring a forest of mushrooms. And the tension rises because sometimes mushrooms can be dangerous, but also the tension dissipates because mushrooms can be cool as fuck, just like this song. Alright, that's the most boring song over. Everyone get hype. Yo, what's up, Vendetta? Welcome to the stream. How's it going? That album art is fantastic. Thank you. I worked really hard on it. I spent a couple weeks in Blender just kind of doing all the modeling, then doing the texturing between Blender and GIMP, and then I put the skybox in, which was also done in GIMP. I've had that album art done for like 10 months, maybe. and then the album just kind of like sat there unreleased, unfinished for a while. You know how it is. I feel like at a certain point I was more excited to get the album art out there than the album itself, because I had the album art for so long. The next song, Assault the Tower, is kind of a fast-paced, more industrial kind of dance tune. It still has a bit of the fictional, fantastical elements. Imagine yourself assaulting a dark tower, and you're cutting through the hallways and fighting up the stairwells, you know? That's this, but a little more industrial. Yeah, I like that one. Been listening to that one for a while. Had it on my phone forever. Isle of Man. So in my fantasy world, man is a weak creature, an isolated creature which is not the main focus of the world, and is very aware that it's not. Well, I'm not sure if it's always aware it's not the main focus of the world, but it's neither here nor there. They live in kind of this swampy marsh area south of Numerat, south of that lake. So you can imagine all the water, all the rivers come down south from that lake and feed the marshlands that the humans live in. And this little semi-dry pocket that they've built their little village upon is called the Isle of Man. I also inadvertently realized that I recomposed green sleeves for this piece, but you know, sometimes that's the nature of the beast. Did y'all hear the green sleeves? Oh, Struggle. This is a good one. Struggle is a Sega Genesis track, kind of inspired by Contra Hardcore and the sounds in that game. It's a pretty fast-paced track. We're going to listen to it twice, actually, because we're going to listen to the remix that I did later. You'll also see that there's a different artist name on the remix. It's Goat Milk. That's my PNG tuber. That's me. That's me on the stream right here. I'm Goat Milk. That's my name. Goat Milk. Goat Milk. Goat Milk EP coming soon. That's not a joke. That's not a joke. Yeah, it's probably one of my favorite tracks on the album. It might be my favorite. Oh, it has to come in second to the remix. The remix is definitely better. The remix was a last minute invention, by the way, too. I just happened to throw the stems into Reaper and I started fucking around with them, and well, we got a last minute song added to the album. You know how that goes. The next song is Magnet Mine, which I think is cooler in theory than it is in practice. Well, I don't know. It sometimes in practice I'm listening to it and I'm like, this sounds pretty cool. It's pretty cool, but I don't know if everyone's gonna fuck with it. You know. I did mention Magnet Mine earlier when I was reading the description. Magnet mine is a mine shaft where the magnetic polarity switches repeatedly, dragging and slamming rocks around in a regular beat. And the song itself tries to emulate that sound. I think you'll notice that as you hear kind of like a dragging, a scraping underneath the bass kick. Anyways, here's Magnet Mine. All right, that was Magnet Mine. We're nearing the end. After Forgotten Waltz, we're going to be on the final stretch of this album. We're going to be on the remixes and the bonus. Forgotten Waltz is another Sega Genesis chiptune. It's a bit short. It really is, rather ironically, forgotten a lot. I forgot to finish it, which is why it's very short, and it's the Forgotten Waltz. I also forgot it when I was uploading tracks both to Bandcamp and YouTube for the first time. I skipped past it in the set list. And I was like, I should have one more song. Where is it? I did this on both YouTube and Bandcamp. I just completely forgot to upload this one. And I was like, I'm missing a song. Which one is it? It was Forgotten Waltz, because I forgot it. Because it's the furtive pygmy of music. All right, on to the remixes and the bonus. Struggle Fuck to Death Mix has its visualizer over on YouTube, so we're gonna check that out. Oh, my cat just came in. He's gonna check it out with us.
What are you looking at? Nothing. Don't you look at me, fuck! I shoot when I see the whites of the
Excellent. That's also my Castlevania gameplay as well. Oh, what have we got here? Oh, YouTube poop. Oh boy. Let's look through the recommendations here. That was on recommendations. That was on the recommendations. Switch doesn't count. Oh yeah, Billy Rossi. I didn't say that right, that's for sure. Ministry again. Hey, that's my own shit. Oh, look at that. We're up to 7 views on Leaf Shade. Isn't that exciting? Do you guys want to hear Fred Flintstone discovered frozen in a block of ice deep in a forgotten cave? Am I glad he's frozen in there and that we're out here and that he's the sheriff and that we're frozen out here and that we're in there and I just remembered we're out here. What I want to know is where's the caveman mix? Does that sound like a good song to you guys? This is the bonus track. Well, that was Fred Flintstone discovered frozen in a block of ice deep in a forgotten cave. Am I glad he's frozen in there and that we're out here and that he's the sheriff and that we're frozen out here and that we're in there and I just remembered we're out here. What I want to know is where's the caveman mix? Not my favorite track on the album, but you know I had to put some Flintstones in there. I'm not sure if anyone noticed it, but one of the melodies for Prison Forest Getrent was definitely a variation on the Flintstones theme. I do that shit. I do that shit. Alright, Herod Gore Pasture's Club Mix. This is the final track of the album. Everyone get hype. We're going to restart that one because it was already like a second in when I hit play, and I just, I can't let that slide. We got to hear that first kick. We really need to hear that first kick. It is vital to my enjoyment of the song. Thank you. Well, there we go. That's the album. Thank you for coming today. If you're hanging out, if you're watching, if you're listening, checking out the album, I definitely appreciate it. Had a lot of fun making it. I had a lot of fun making the art. Again, if you enjoyed anything you heard today, check out the album on Bandcamp. I just put the link in the chat. And we're going to let that club mix play one more time to play us out. We're going to end the stream there. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.